And just to take the story forward, an institution that will be hosting this dialogue later on, the University of Pretoria African Center for the Study of the U.S. We're joined by their director, Professor Christopher Isike, at the center. Joins us now via Zoom. A very good morning to you, Professor Isike, and thank you for making the time. Professor Isike, are you with us? Can you unmute yourself, please, Professor Isike?
I just did. I was saying good morning to you and thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I suppose this falls within the area of your work. Just, is there anything new in Secretary Blinken's Africa strategy?
Well, yes, this is mainly in terms of its conception and approach towards Africa as equal partners. Previously, such partnerships with Africa have been informed and characterized by power relations in which the U.S. kind of dictates the terms. So therefore, engaging Africa as equal partners is a bit refreshing in light of Africa's countries' demonstrated capacity, to contribute towards solving global problems, our capacity to diversify our international relations, our international economic and trade, as well as cooperate with whoever we want in terms of choosing our partners.
So what opportunities does the strategy present for South Africa or Africa to develop its own U.S. strategy, to develop its own interests?
Well, I don't think we should wait for these kinds of visits to begin to develop our strategy towards the United States. They've had Africa, U.S. Africa, policies and strategies since the 80s. And this is because they have dedicated centers that study Africa, and then based on that, they produce knowledge that they use to engage with us. On the other hand, we've been engaging with them, from a knowledge deficit position. And this is why our center is critical. But in terms of what this particular visit presents South Africa, we must note that South Africa is the U.S. Third largest trade partner, or actually the largest trade partner in the continent, and it hosts over 600 American businesses, many of which are headquartered in South Africa. And South Africa contributes 25% of all U.S. income from the continent and consistently receives most of the foreign direct investments from the U.S. So these visits will help to reinforce these bilateral relationship between both countries, which is a priority for the United States, and then also help to emphasize South Africa's central role in the sub-region and on the continent in terms of actively promoting greater trade and integration, for the continent's prosperity.
It's interesting that you said third largest trading partner, then you moved and said first, but just are there any differences between the strategies of China, the EU and Russia towards Africa as compared to that of the US? If a person watching wanted to know, how do they discern?
Well, this is a big question, but Africa's role as a geostrategically vital region is growing steadily. And the leading states and economic centers of power, the United States, the European Union, China, and Russia, clearly are beginning to realize the high importance of the resource, human, and growing economic potential of Africa in terms of the transition from a unipolar world order, and the tendency towards what I call a uni-multipolar world order. So in the context of this emerging global world order that I'm talking about, the strategies of the US, I think of China, represents, if you want to compare them, represents much more antagonistic approaches based on their fundamentally different messages. So, for example, in the case of the US, the line is to deter, sometimes by denial, the spread of the competitors' influence, which is China in the continent, and increasingly so with Russia. So using tough policies, sanctions, including confrontational actions, sometimes trade wars. Then the Chinese, on the other hand, their strategy, is to resort to minimal confrontation where possible, but also try to promote freedom of interaction with partners in Africa. The Russia and the EU are much more passive and retroactive in terms of how they approach Africa as a continent. The interests of these past centers, they are not necessarily
Professor Isike,
but they are having.
We're having time
Yes.
constraints, but just a quick one. Your center studies the U.S. What are your thoughts on this visit, especially in the environment of the Russia-Ukraine conflict?
Well, our centers does study the U.S., and we think that there are three things that I think we can leverage from this visit. It's the competition from China, the African youth population, and the soft power opportunity we currently have. So given the number of the youths in the African youth population and the future development, the youths are critical stakeholders for any foreign policy power to begin to look at now. So they are becoming very important political and economic agenda setters. So, and we think that the United States should, begin to look at investing in youth in ways that will begin to change their perceptions of the U.S. And make it more attractive. So, one way to do this is through supporting knowledge creation in the U.S. on Africa, and encouraging study and cultural exchanges between students of African and U.S. universities, as well as research exchanges between them. And this is why I think our center stands an important chance to be able to produce knowledge that will become useful to foster knowledge-driven engagement between Africa and the United States.
Let's thank you for your time this morning. Professor Christopher Isike is the director of the University of Pretoria African Center for the Study of